The views expressed on the following program do not necessarily reflect those of WPSL. However, we urge you to like and share them on Facebook. It's Wednesday night. It's 6:06, and it's time for the African American Scene, brought to you by Howard Insurance in Port St. Lucie, and hosted by Rudy Howard.
Good evening, good evening, good evening. Always glad to be with you here on a Wednesday night. Oh, boy, we got all kind of stuff going on.
Your show kind of started earlier today on Facebook, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. You did. Yeah, I threw out some information about voter suppression, and some people responded. Listen, I'll tell you, we're getting our age now, because I remember Mary Tyler Moore like it was yesterday with the Dick Van Dyke Show. Mm-hmm. Grew up watching that. That's kind of a sad day. But, you know, we're reaching that age where some of our heroes are leaving here.
We grow up watching these people all of our lives, and we feel like we know them, and they're close to us.
Yeah.
And when they pass away, we grieve.
Yeah. Well, open enrollment for ACA or Obamacare is still available until January 31st. This year, it's really difficult to do. I will only do it if you're already doing some kind of business with me. Hopefully, we'll have a better situation next year. I just added a new auto carrier. I now represent Windhaven Auto. That's Windhaven Auto. So I have a new auto carrier. Matter of fact, I was working on my first quote with them today, so I should be able to have some idea how competitive they are in a few days. Now, I have to tell you, Trump, now, I'm going to give you, let me do my normal thing. Tonight, we're going to have an open mic night, and I'm going to lay out my topics for tonight. This is what I usually do. And then you can call in and debate me on them if you disagree. But we're going to talk about the Affordable Care Act. Voter fraud is phony. Voter suppression. And finally, I want to talk about the Oregon law that adopted automatic voter registration. Very interesting. I did some research on that. It's a very interesting law. So, if you want to discuss any of those topics, the number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. And Winnie, I did get your note. Thank you very much. And I will get on there and get myself my name in the pool to see if I can win. Okay. Now, I'm going to tell you, we've had our new president-elect claiming that there was voter fraud, which is why he lost the popular vote. No one seems to be able to verify his allegation that 3 to 5 million people voted illegally. So the question is, why is he doing that? Well, he's doing it because he is setting the stage to have the Justice Department withdraw any support for voter suppression laws. Voter suppression laws have been having a profound impact all across this country since they eliminated the oversight provisions of the Voting Rights Act. Now, this fraud allegation is completely phony. It is a piece of garbage. It's been investigated over and over and over. The Bush administration did a 5-year study, and at the end of that study turned up virtually no evidence of any organized effort to skew election results. That's Bush. not a liberal, not a Democrat. Bush turned up the fact that there is no evidence of voter fraud. Now, for my conservative friends, I understand that part of this is you feel this is political gamesmanship. I would just like to raise your sensitivity level. You can jury rig districts. You can block legislation. You can tell lies to try to get the upper hand on your point of view. But don't mess with the vote. I'm telling you, you're playing with fire because there's too much blood on the ground from people who fought to get the vote for that to happen. You are working on an insurrection of unimaginable proportions. Just people, I could tell you, black people won't take it. They just will not take it. So what I'm trying to tell you as your friend, there's all kinds of things you can do and do them and call that political gamesmanship. Don't mess with the vote. There was 4 little black girls that died in that church in Alabama.
They weren't doing nothing wrong in there either.
No, for trying to get people to right to vote. Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney died in Philadelphia, Mississippi, trying to get black people to right to vote. Don't mess with the vote. Just something you shouldn't do. There's all kinds of things that you can do. You've already jury-rigged districts. I can live with that. I can live with you blocking legislation. That's part of the gamesmanship of being the majority in charge, but not the vote. And at some point, I hope we get to a point of a national program when it comes to voting. Let's talk about some of the things that have happened, though. And if you want to disagree with me, that phone number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590. North Carolina, they were purging voters from the rolls. And when it went to court, the judge's statement was she was horrified and that it was a laser-like precision with which they were eliminating black and brown voters. Now, as close as that election was, one has to wonder what would have happened if they had been able to eliminate that purging. They caught them after they were already doing it and then put a stop to it, but it was already underway. In Texas, the voter ID law, the judge called it a modern-day poll tax. This is Texas. Very conservative judge in Texas was offended by this voter suppression law in Texas. And in Wisconsin, same thing. The voter suppression law was overturned by the judge in Wisconsin. Now, what Wisconsin did, though, the judge required IDs to be distributed to people, and Wisconsin drugged their feet. So now 2 of the key states, Wisconsin and North Carolina, you had verified, certified voter suppression. And there's no doubt if she won both of those states, Hillary Clinton would be our president. Right? But that's beside the point. But the fact is, there is verified, certified voter suppression, not by liberals, not by Democrats, but by the courts. The courts and the judges have determined that there was voter suppression. And I just think that's tragic. That now, for some
Yes, that's worse than fraud.
oh man,
It's a step and a half, maybe 2 steps worse than fraud.
yeah. It really is a sad situation that we have people that are okay with voter suppression. That's just not okay, you know. And like I said, I can live with all the other political games that you want to play, but don't mess with the vote. Just don't mess with the vote. And Steve, good evening. Steve, good evening.
How you doing, Rudy? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to tell you, 1.75 million Americans died since we started America, so we'd have the right to vote, among other things, but the right to vote was the biggie. Did those people die in vain so that a few racists and bigots can screw up our system?
I get very emotional about it, Steve.
Well, so do I. I mean, I get angry because to me, they're taking away my basic right as an American. And if you do that, then we might as well just give up the whole country.
Yeah,
We're
because
the only ones in this world that have this right.
and listen, and they do it because they want a short circuit. Our system says that the person with the best ideas win. Right. If you don't have the best ideas or people don't support your ideas, then damn it, you don't win.
Right.
And
but
then
they cheat.
Right.
That's the thing. They cheat. and you know, I don't know. I think it's going to get down to being real dirty and nasty pretty soon, because I know I'm getting tired of it.
Yeah.
And it can't be allowed to go on, or we will lose that right.
Yes.
You wait and see. You know, this is. But Dennis told me this once. He said, "Steve, ignore your teeth; they'll go away." No, well, ignore your right to vote; it'll go away. So it's the same thing. And until people realize that they're getting cheated, it's going to keep going on.
Yeah.
And until we get rid of the racism, Jesus, I can't believe when a black baby, a brown baby, and a white baby are all born in the same day, the same hospital, and they grow up, but they grow up with 3 different personalities based on their race.
Well, let me tell you something. Cliff and I talk about this. Cliff and I talk about this all the time, Steve. You want to see innocence, go to a preschool.
Yep.
Those kids don't know nothing about color. Nothing.
Right.
They're just blowing snot all over each other and hugging each other, and they don't have a clue about I'm white, you're black. And it's there.
I saw this back in the 70s. I had logged thousands of hours as a Head Start volunteer.
Uh-huh.
And I saw this, and I thought all my life since then, you know, eventually the old racists and haters, they're just going to die off, and everybody else isn't even going to remember what the problem was.
Yeah.
You know, and that'll be.
I'm waiting for it. Yeah. I'm waiting for them to die off. I'll tell you that, and I'll tell you something. I'm a senior, and it's my generation that's screwing things up.
Oh yeah.
And I'm ashamed of them. To tell you the truth, I'm deeply ashamed of them. They need to look at those 1.75 million Americans who laid down their lives so that these people could have the freedom to open up their mouth.
That's right.
And they don't get it. They don't get it at all.
Well, no, because they want us to take the shortcut. And I've had this debate with other conservatives. I said, listen, if the public is not accepting your ideas, then you modify it. Democrats went through periods where that was the case, where their ideology was out of step with the people, and what did they do? They modified it.
That's right.
When FDR came to power, most non-white people were Republicans. FDR understood what the situation was, and he modified. It's a simple process. Our government is so simple. You bring the idea, and if the majority of the people agree with you, you're going to win. Now, you're going to have some machinations, some jury rigging, and some lack of honesty on some issues, but for the overall part, it's a simple process. The person with the best idea wins.
You know what I'd do, Rudy? If I was in charge for one day, emperor for a day, on election day, I would shut everything down except the hospitals. And you wouldn't have anything to do except go vote.
I think that's an excellent idea. I think that's come up a couple times. Having a national holiday for a
everything's closed.
It should be. I agree with you.
Hey,
Disney World, everything's closed. All you can do that
Day.
day is go to the hospital or vote.
That's right. I agree.
Wow.
I agree. That's a great idea. Well, thank you, Steve.
I'll let
Always
you
a
go.
faithful listener. Thank you, sir.
All righty.
We're going to take a little break, and I'm waiting for your call. That number is 340-1590. That's 340-1590.
Voter
And don't touch that dial, because we're going to be right back with the African American scene.
voter suppression laws. The phrase alone implies that voter suppression does exist. We'll find out more, and you can call in. Well, now that you know all about Howard Insurance and being a Wind Haven carrier, it's a real good thing. But you know what you need to do now? Now you need to participate in the show, because we've come to the point in the show where 340-1590, we want you to tune in. But if we know that you're probably in the car or something, you know, and if you are, well, get ready to go watch us live online. We are live on a webcam right now. Just go to WPSL.com. The simple, plain old, original WPSL.com. There's a text link near the top of the page that says live webcam. You want to watch this show like it's on television, like it was on YouTube or something. It's actually Ustream, accessible through WPSL.com. Now back to the African American scene with Rudy Howard.
Well, you know, Steve gave me some information that I didn't even have. That 1.75 million people have died in the fight for people to have the right to vote. I think that's amazing. You know, I have to tell you, that's. Let me tell you about how voter suppression can be executed and why it can be so unfair. And I think I may have told some of you this before, but and a lot of the people that were affected by this now are not with us anymore. But let me tell you, back in the day, like when my father was born, most kids in the black communities were born by midwives because they weren't allowed to go to the hospital. And the way this worked is they designated an attorney in the county that was responsible for filing all the births, okay? So now, as you can imagine, there was probably less than perfect record keeping at that time, since this assignment was done by a white attorney within the county where the birth took place. But let me take this next phone call. We got a phone call with Ray. Ray, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine, sir. And yourself?
Okay.
I had a question for you about the voter suppression. Where do you think that is coming from? Let's just take the state of Wisconsin. They have a Republican governor, but they are very much a liberal state with a liberal state legislature. So, where is that coming from?
No, sir, they do not have a liberal legislature. They have a Republican legislature. But I think it's coming from, here's my humble opinion, and don't be offended by this. I think voter suppression is an attempt by conservatives to short-circuit the system so that they can gain political power because some of their ideas are not accepted by the mass. So what they do is to limit some of the votes to ensure that they can win a particular seat in order to bring forth their conservative agenda. My opinion.
So you're thinking it is voter suppression at a state legislature level, so they can put legislation in place that would limit the votes and impact a nationwide election.
Yes.
How does voter ID fall into that? How does a voter ID? I mean, we're required to have a ID to drive a car. Why is a voter ID different and somehow a form of voter suppression or a voting tax, as you said earlier?
That wasn't me said it. That was the judge said it was equivalent to a poll tax. And now I'm going to tell
you seem to be in agreement with him, so that's why I'm asking you. If you're not in agreement with him, then I guess the question is moot.
Well, I didn't write the decision, but it would seem to me, on the face of it, that decision, that the description of what was going on might be apropos. But here's what I'm going to say. Here's how it works. I live in Philadelphia, okay? And I go to work every day on SEPTA. I don't need a car. I don't drive a car. Don't even know how to drive a car. And so my whole world is public transportation, trolleys, subways, buses.
Okay.
So I don't have a driver's license.
Okay.
So you're going to force me to get a driver's license in order to be able to vote?
No, there's you can go online to the state of Florida and get a state ID, and you're not even charged for it.
Well, I did that when I first came here, and I did have to pay a fee for it. But okay, but we're talking about Philadelphia now, because at Port St. Lucie, you couldn't survive in Port St. Lucie without a driver's license because everything's so spread out. But think about the people that are in. Well, let me take you another example. New York City. I got friends that live in Brooklyn. I got friends that live in Manhattan. And none of them own cars.
Okay.
They go to work every day on the subway. And I have one, and both of my friends do have licenses, and if they want to go somewhere, they rent a car for the weekend. Rental car business in New York City is very good because the average person in New York City does not own a car. First of all, the parking is astronomical.
Okay.
So now you're placing an undue burden on someone that's a lawful citizen that may not have a license. Is that fair?
Again, there are other IDs that are available through the state to receive. You don't have to have a driver's license. All you have to have is an ID of some kind.
Well,
I mean, everybody's got a birth certificate.
Well, I was just explaining that a little before you called. Let me explain to you about the birth certificate, especially for older black folks. Now, most of them now are not with us anymore, but there's still some here. Like my parents, okay? The children that were born in my parents' era, 99% of them were born with midwives because they weren't allowed to go to the hospital, okay? So the way the process worked on birth certificates, the attorney appointed in the county, the white attorney appointed in the county, was responsible for recording all the births of the black people that resided in that county. So needless to say, it was less than carefully done, and oftentimes the records were incorrect, and sometimes the date was incorrect and the names was incorrect. Now, I will, and I'm going to give you my own personal story of my father. My father, and I'm a junior, my father was walking around all his life with his name, and on the first time that my mother and him was going to Europe and he had to get a passport, he tracked down his birth certificate and it had a different name on it than he had used for 55 years. That's the kind of thing. Now, fortunately, My mother and father were not poor. So the $300, $400, $500 that it took him to straighten that out, he got it straightened out. But suppose my father was poor. How does he fix that? Now he can't get voter registration because his birth certificate doesn't match.
So you're saying any request whatsoever for any kind of voter ID is going to be, in your opinion, a form of voter suppression?
No, I think if it's reasonable. For example, I believe it's North Carolina, maybe it's Texas. In Texas, you can have a driver's license, you can have a gun license, but you can't have a student ID. I'm not sure I understand that. Well, why wouldn't you allow a student ID as a form of identification?
Does a student ID identify whether you are indeed a citizen or not and deserve the right to vote? You would agree that for the privilege of voting, you need to be a citizen of this country, correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Maybe the student IDs in Texas don't have that qualifier on them. I can't speak for the state of Texas.
Okay.
I am speaking from somebody that it seems like all we get back is pushback from the left anytime we want to have some kind of voter ID, even as as inexpensive as we can try to make it. I'm not sure how much the charge is to go to a specific state and ask for a state ID. I mean, the company we work for, we have several people that don't have a driver's license. That has to do with their inability to not drive with alcohol, but either way, they have to have an ID, and they go and they get a state ID. So, I mean, there are other options out there. Like I said, I take offense to any request for a voter ID being seen as a form of voter suppression.
Well, sir, you might take offense at it, but what are we trying to solve by mandating a voter ID?
Making sure that people who are voting have the right to do so.
Does your driver's license certify you're a United States citizen?
No, but my voter registration card that I have does.
No, well, I don't think it certifies that you're a United States citizen, but it verifies that you're a resident of that county and in what district and precinct you're in.
Okay, then maybe we need to on the voter registration process. Maybe we need to expand that where it does identify whether you are indeed a citizen. And if you're not a citizen, then you don't get a voter's registration card.
Well, in the past, a voter registration card was adequate. Why isn't that adequate?
Well, if it doesn't correctly and accurately identify who is and who is not allowed to vote, then it is flawed.
Well, voter ID doesn't necessarily correct that problem.
Okay. So what is the answer? Just letting anybody vote without any qualification?
Well, here's what I've said, and I've said it before and I'll say it again. If there was a identified issue of voter fraud, I would be on the front lines with you stating that we have to do something in order to eliminate voter fraud. But I have yet to see any evidence that voter fraud is an issue.
Okay,
so
well,
what are we?
How are you going to see the evidence when people can go down and all they have to do is pull out a driver's license or a voter registration ID that doesn't say whether you're a citizen or not?
Well, because we've had extensive investigations. When you didn't hear me at the beginning of the show.
I was listening to the beginning of your show.
Okay. There was a 5-year study by the Bush administration on voter fraud, and it was virtually non-existent. So what are we trying to stop?
Well, hey, at least I finally got to listen to a liberal agree with something George Bush did.
Hey, let me tell you something. And I'm going to surprise you. I actually think George Bush, as a human being, was a pretty decent guy. Now, Dick Cheney and Rumsfeld, that's a whole nother story, And I think they led him down a bad path. So I bet you that shocks you.
Very little I hear on the radio shocks me. Things that happen to me personally shock me.
Okay.
I would probably say that you have a valid argument for that. The problem I have with a study can say, okay, we can't find evidence of voter fraud, but if there's no means or method in place to verify whether a person who is voting has the proper qualifications, then how do you determine whether there's fraud or not?
Well, they go back and they research. They take a sampling of the votes, and then they go back and cross-check that against the records that the state has for that individual, determine whether or not there was any improper voting. And they find some, very minimal, but they do find some. But there's no evidence that it is of any kind of dramatic problem.
Okay, well, at what point does it stop being acceptable and become a dramatic problem? When it gets to the point where it can actually affect the outcome of a election? Do you wait till that actually happens, or I don't know about you, but when I start getting sniffles, I go ahead and take cold medicine. I don't wait for the full-blown flu.
Okay. I get your point, but what I'm saying is I don't even see sniffles right now. If I saw sniffles, I might be inclined to agree with you.
Okay, well, all right, then let's go back to your voter suppression thing. Do you think that voter suppression in Wisconsin and North Carolina was sufficient enough to change the outcome of either of those states' elections?
Possibly, especially in North Carolina. I don't know as much about Wisconsin, but I do know a lot about North Carolina.
Okay, because I don't think I do believe, according to the Electoral College, that if both of those states had went to Hillary, Donald Trump still would have been at the inauguration last Friday.
Okay, all right.
Wisconsin has 10, and North Carolina, I believe, gets 15. He's got 306, so that leaves them at 280. So again, like I said, I mean, it's all right, people not voting. That
I'm not. Let me just say this: I'm not one of those guys that's going to say that I don't think he's a legal president. Our system, the electoral system, elected him, and that is what it is. What it is, and I accept that.
No. And that's fine. And that's great that you do, because there's a lot of people that don't. But that being said, I mean, if we are going to look at the voter suppression, you're saying that there is evidence to a certain degree of that, and you've just admitted that, okay, yeah, there was some evidence of a minor amount of voter fraud. I mean, do we look at one and not look at both?
Well, we have looked at both. That's the point that I'm trying to make. We have had extensive.
Well, I understand that, but wouldn't a voter ID take care of both of those?
Well, we've had extensive. I've explained to you why a voter ID in some cases might be oppressive and unfair in terms of putting an unfair burden. I explained to you what happened to my father the first time him and my mother was going to Europe, and if he had been a poor person, which my dad was not, the $300 to $500 it cost him to straighten out his birth certificate, he couldn't have done.
Okay, all right. I will understand, and I will give you that point. But I think that I don't think that a voter ID is going to adversely affect a large number of people either way, whether it's conservative or liberal. And with the amount of money that the DNC and the RNC spends on sending people out, getting them to register to vote, I don't think it's I still think it's a viable option that doesn't pick on either the conservative or the Democrat or the liberal or Republican. I just think it's a good idea that can take care of both. How much money do we spend every year, get out the vote? How much money do we spend trying to check and see if there has been voter fraud? I think somebody should look and see what the cost would be for, an implemented voter ID.
Okay.
Or an extra box that you can check on the driver's license.
Okay. All right. Well,
it doesn't offend me to have somebody ask me for an ID when I go down to the voters, to a voter's booth. I don't look at it as a poll tax. Voting is a right and a privilege.
Well, it's not a privilege.
To me, it is. You don't
No,
think
it's
it's a
not.
privilege?
Voting is a right. The Constitution guarantees my right to be able to cast a vote. That's not no privilege. It's not a privilege at all.
Maybe a poor choice of words on my part, or maybe the way I look at the definition of the word versus the way you do. But either way, it's something that I consider. Everybody has the right to do it, and I really see a voter ID as being a really easy way to make sure that everybody gets to do what is their right to do, and to make sure that the people that shouldn't should not.
Okay, Ray. Well, thank you very much. I got another caller that I got to get to, but thank you for calling and thank you for listening. And we got Andrew on line too. Yes, sir.
Okay, let me turn my radio down.
Okay.
There's a little delay. Rudy, great show. I listened to you dozens and dozens of times, but this show, in my personal opinion, is shot up in the top one or two out of all I've listened to. Great topics. Ray kind of robbed my thunder in regards to voter identification and so on and so forth in regards to that. But I guess after 9/11, when they came up with the Patriot Act, that all states must comply with state driver's license, that you have to have some type of identification mark that as proof you are, number one, a United States citizen, number two, a legal resident of the state of which you reside. Okay, in the state of Florida, just give you for instance, I lost my driver's license about 3-4 months ago, and it was about to expire anyway. And people were telling me about the new driver's licenses, and they said, "Oh, have you recognized the gold star next to the word state of Florida?" I said, "Yeah, I have," and I never understood what the significance of it was. Well, apparently the state of Florida, phased in over 3 or 4 years, that those people applying for a state driver's license must prove American citizenship. I was not aware of that. Hence the gold star next to the word, the top in the right-hand margin, top right-hand margin, there's a gold star. Reason being is that when I went down to renew my driver's license, I thought I had every type of identification under the sun, and I'm white. Obviously, you can probably hear it from the tone of my voice. And I'm whiter than the purest snow. But, man, they gave me over the DMV over in Martin County when they were doing their job, obviously. And I was like, wow. And I was like, the only thing I didn't have was my Social Security card, which I did not know I needed as proof of American citizenship. But, Rudy, still there?
Yeah, I'm still here. I'm listening.
Okay, cool. Because my cell phone battery is slowly getting low. But just to let your last caller know, there is some law that has been that all 50 states must comply, that when you get a state driver's license, you have to go a major rigmarole through the Patriot Act. And I had no idea about this until I got the bureaucratic lamb-based. You know how it is at the old proverbial PhD.
I went through the same thing the last time I renewed my license. Same thing. I was like, I got down there and I was just like you. I'm going, what? You need what? I had a voter registration card. I've been voting here for over 15 years. What do you want? Yeah.
And it's like, they like the bureaucratic red tape and the money your father had to do to prove his, birth, number one, and then who and what he is, and they're giving me a heap of gump, and I'm thinking, my mom just gave me my baby book when I was an infant, where she had locks of hair, and it's just like, okay, but I'm sorry, I'm trying to put a little levity to it.
Well,
but really,
thank you, sir.
But A point I was trying that Ray was bringing up, your previous caller, is isn't there a way for states, the people who are not necessarily downtrodden, but have some type of identification that there are state agencies, whether it's through their county, a board of registration or a voter registration, where somehow they can make it by a bicycle, by a train, where if it's going to cost them a couple dollars just to get down there and say, hey, this is the best I got, and where the state or the local municipality, county municipality, can help that person, regardless of the political affiliation, and get the person through. I mean,
well, you can buy a Florida ID at the DMV.
Right, I believe it's $35 and it's 5 years. If I'm.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to tell Andrew earlier. He said it's free. I said no, it costs us some money. But anyway, thank you so much. I got calls backing up. Thank you, sir, for calling in, and thank you for being a listener. And we got Steve. Steve.
Yes, I've been a listener of yours for a long time. There are things that you have said in the past that I have truly agreed with. There are things that you have said in the past I didn't agree with. But I would like to know this.
Okay.
What is in your perception of the way things need to be, can you tell me what is the best way to ensure, regardless, whatever the procedures may be, and I'm telling you, I don't know if this is going to be on a state level or a federal level, but what in your mind is the best way to ensure that people have the right to vote? What would be that procedure?
Okay, I'm glad you asked me that. Oregon started the first automatic voter registration in the United States. When you turn 18, you're automatically registered to vote in the state of Oregon. And this past election cycle, they had 80% turnout. Now, that can't be difficult because you and I sound like we're close enough in age that we remember when we turned 18, we had to go down and sign up for the draft.
I'm 68, big time. I understood it.
Okay, so I'm 65. So
there
we had to go down. There was no argument. There was no discussion. You went down, you filled out the form, and you were registered for selective service. Why can't we do what Oregon did?
But then let me ask you this.
Okay.
If somebody goes into the state offices at the state of Oregon, what type of credentials are they required to submit to confirm that they are residents and that they are obligated to do this?
I don't know that. I do know you have the right to opt out if you want, but the main thing is that every person in the state of Oregon automatically gets registered to vote. And I just think it just can't get any better than that. You eliminate all of this baloney. You eliminate the voter ID, the voter suppression. Just do what Oregon did. I mean, they did it. It's working great. I looked it up today. They had an 80% voter turnout.
I really want to be on the positive side of this with you. I really do. I'm a man who has voted for all of my life since I was 20 years old, or 21 rather. And I have, I've tried to have a lot of faith in the system, but I also, forgive me if I'm being misunderstood, then by some, then let me be misunderstood. I have distrust. Can you understand what I am saying?
Yes.
And I hear all this stuff that comes from Fox, it comes from CBS, NBC, MSNBC, and everybody else. But I ask myself, if I go in and I register, what are you asking of me to prove that I am a United States citizen or at least a resident at the very least?
Okay.
You understand what I'm asking?
Yes, I do. And if you recall, when we had to register to vote, you had to provide some kind of identification that verified your address.
But I can go ahead and verify my address with a utility bill. Am I right?
Yes, you could.
But does that confirm that I am a United States citizen or a resident of the United States?
Well, it confirms that you're a resident of the United States. Listen, if you're asking for a fail-safe system,
yes, I'm looking for it. I'm desperately looking for it.
There is no such thing. Think about this. The checking system in this country presupposes that people will not write checks if they don't have money in the bank.
Correct.
Can you imagine if everybody in this country just started writing checks and they didn't have money in the bank?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so there's a certain amount of trust that we have to believe in with the way our systems work. It's just the way they work. And I got one more caller, and I'm coming near the end of the hour. I want to give her a chance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Phyllis, how are you this evening?
Fine, thank you. How are you, Rudy? Thank you for taking my call.
Oh, I'd love to get women callers. It's wonderful.
Well, thank you. A couple of things on the voter registration. I don't see how it suppresses the vote, especially when it was stated that they would pay for people's ID, number one. So there was no cost to anybody. So that the cost is taken out. The second thing is, I know when I went to renew my license here in Florida, it was a nightmare.
Yes.
I couldn't find my birth certificate. I don't know, my mom had it or whatever. I had to write to New York, fill out the computer thing, pay for an express mail, which was something like $15 or whatever it was. Waited, didn't get it, called them up. Oh, well, you marked the Queens box because you were born in St. Albans, but it's really not Queens. It went to Queens, upstate New York. So we're sending you an express to tell you that we're not sending it to you. So then they redid. I had to reapply, and they sent me another fee, and they finally sent that. So when you go to get your new driver's license, you got to have your birth certificate, you got to have your social security number, you have to have proof of where you say you live. So how is that that to me, I feel like, what am I, a criminal? I lived my whole life here. I'm a citizen, and I got to jump through hoops, but they're screaming and yelling that they can't get a free card to prove who they are when they go to vote. What are these people using when they get on a plane? What are these people using when they go to Publix and write a check? Don't hear me, they don't have proof of who they are. They got to have proof of who they are. I don't see that as how they're disenfranchising anybody having an ID. My aunt never drove in her life. She went to DMV. They gave her a thing that looked just like a driver's license, but it was not. It was to prove who she was. Now, why can't we have that? When you go to vote and register, when you go to the voting booth, they ask you for ID. They should ask you for ID. And what about the people in California? They wanted to pass, and I don't know if they passed it. People who have green cards, they wanted to give them driver's licenses. Well, if you give them a driver's license, it doesn't give them a right to vote. Who's going to stop them from voting?
Well, that's a whole mouthful. You first.
Well, I know you said you're coming to the end of the thing. And one more thing, I know a personal friend of mine for like 25 years who worked in New York in the voter as a voter person, and she said they brought busloads of people in, were told do not check their IDs. So it does there is voter fraud. There's no doubt about it. How much there is, who knows? But to be naive and say it's not happening, not buying that story. I think everybody should have an ID, and everybody should prove who they are when they go to vote. I don't think that's disenfranchising anybody, the whites, the blacks. I don't care, the Muslims. I don't care who you are. You should have to prove who you are.
Okay. I hear you. But what I feel about the voter ID is that it's a solution looking for a problem as opposed to a solution solving a problem. If there's no evidence of voter fraud, as has been the case over many, many, many investigations, why are we making people jump through them hoops? Why did you have to jump through that hoop? You must have had a voter registration card after living here all this time, just like I did. Why did you have to go through that?
Well, I had to renew my driver's license, and that was a new requirement just to get a driver's license.
I know,
so right. But when you go to the polls, why can't you show ID? Why do you feel that you're being disenfranchised or you're being picked on or you're being discriminated against because I'm asking you for ID? Prove who you are. It's not that hard.
I explained to you earlier, you weren't listening, why that can be difficult for some groups of people. Now, most of the people that I'm referring to now are probably no longer with us, but I'll do it again real quick because we're coming to the end of the hour. In the people my mother and father's age, God rest their souls, because neither one of them are here anymore, they were born by midwives. So their registration of birth was done by an attorney appointed for the county, the white attorney appointed for the county to register the births. And he did them all for that county for black people. So as a result, you had some inaccuracies about people's birth registrations and names. And the example that I used in my that I talked about before, and I got to hurry up and get this out.
Oh yeah, I caught the end of that. Yeah, I did. So I understand your point, but how many of those people are still being affected, and why can't we move on from this point? Because those people, how many served in the military? I mean, you got to have ID today. You can stop by a cop. What do they show them? What do you show? You have to show your driver's license. You got to show something. I don't understand why people.
My father was a veteran. My father was a veteran.
So he had a military ID.
No, he had been a veteran. He was in Korea. But anyway,
right.
I'm
right. Doesn't he have a military ID? He has one of those. Everybody that can stay in the military, my dad, my uncles, everybody I know carries around one of these little square things in their wallet and proves who they are.
Well,
that they were in the military. So he had one of those.
Phyllis,
yeah.
We got to go. Thank you for listening. Come back.
Yes, I enjoy your show very much.
Well, come back with me again next week.
Oh, you bet. You have a good evening. Thanks for taking my call, Rudy.
Okay, thank you, Phyllis. All right, bye-bye.
You've been listening to the African Americans. You know, often after Rudy's show, it sounds to me like, and I can't tell the difference whether Rudy's become a little more bit conservative or if the audience has become a little more liberal.
Yeah.
Listening every Wednesday night in the 6 o'clock hour, right here on WPSL Port St. Lucie. Archives of this show are on YouTube.
Thank you very much for listening to the African American Scene. God bless and be safe. And I'll see you next Wednesday.
This is the